Lyra walked slowly along the edge of the floating gardens. The soft breeze carried the scent of violet blossoms and the faint hum of energy crystals that powered the city's platforms. The city of Zyphera stretched below her, its silver towers gleaming under the pale sun and bridges of light connecting every floating district. From this height, she could see the daily life of the Veyari, a world that should have felt familiar but never had. She had spent almost all her life feeling invisible. Her family barely noticed her presence. Her peers ignored her, not because she lacked skill or intelligence, but because she did not fit their idea of success or beauty. Lyra was thoughtful, quiet, and always observant. She liked watching the small details, the way the wind made the petals twist, the subtle changes in light on the crystalline structures, but these were not things others valued. To the Veyari, status and display mattered. She had none of it. Sitting alone on a platform that jutted out like a narrow wing over the city, she stared at the distant gardens floating beside other towers. Children laughed as they floated along with their hoverboards, and couples held hands as they passed between the light bridges. Lyra felt the familiar pang of loneliness. She drew her knees close and wrapped her arms around them, trying to feel smaller, invisible. It was easier that way. If no one saw her, no one could judge her. A quiet hum caught her attention. Lyra glanced sideways and saw a group of Veyari officials moving down one of the lower bridges. They wore flowing robes of deep blue and silver, their symbols marking them as important. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, looked directly toward Lyra. Lyra quickly turned her gaze back to the horizon. Her heart raced. She had always feared the attention of those who mattered in Veyari society. Their scrutiny had often meant lectures, punishments, or gentle reminders of her inadequacy. Today, she wanted only to remain unseen. The hum grew louder, and then she noticed a different presence, one that was not Veyari. A small shuttle, unlike anything she had seen before, descended gently onto a landing platform nearby. Its surface was smooth, almost reflective, and it bore the marks of a species unknown to her. From the hatch, a group of beings stepped out, moving with careful precision. Lyra's eyes widened. They were humans. She had read about them in historical records, but had never expected to see one in person. They were shorter than her species, stocky in some ways, and dressed in muted uniforms. There was a confidence in the way they moved, a calm assurance that spoke of experience and courage. Lyra's curiosity overcame her fear. She moved closer to the edge of the platform, careful to remain unseen, and watched as the humans spread out. One of them, taller than the rest and with a calm, thoughtful face, seemed to observe everything around him. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his eyes scanned the city with a mixture of wonder and analysis. There was something about him that made Lyra's chest tighten, a quiet strength, a presence that demanded attention without demanding it. She had no idea why, but she felt drawn to him. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps it was a subtle recognition that someone, for the first time, might see the world as she did. The human moved toward the floating gardens, carefully stepping between the platforms, while the others followed behind. Lyra's pulse quickened. She had never approached outsiders before, and certainly not someone like him. And yet she did something she rarely allowed herself. She stayed. She followed, keeping to the shadows, watching his every step. The gardens were quiet, filled with the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft hum of energy crystals. Lyra had always loved this place because it felt safe. Today, it felt different. She noticed the human pausing to admire a cluster of violet flowers. He reached out a hand slowly, almost reverently, and let his fingers brush the petals. Lyra had expected humans to be rough, careless, or destructive. Instead, he moved with careful attention as if every small detail mattered. He turned slightly and his eyes met hers. Lyra froze, unsure whether to retreat. But instead of alarm, she saw curiosity mirrored in his gaze. A faint smile appeared on his face, and he lifted a hand in greeting. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had been invisible her whole life, and yet this human had noticed her. After a long moment, he stepped closer, but not too close, respecting the unspoken distance between them. "Hello," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I'm Ethan. Are you from here?" Lyra hesitated. She wasn't used to being asked questions, especially not by someone who seemed genuinely interested. Most Veyari treated her as if she were a shadow, something to be ignored. She wanted to retreat, but curiosity anchored her in place. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm Lyra." Ethan nodded, studying her without judgment. "Lyra," he repeated, as if savoring the sound. "It's nice to meet you. I don't meet many locals who are willing to speak with outsiders. Can I sit here?" He gestured to the platform beside her. Lyra blinked. No one had ever asked her to share space, much less sit beside her. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement, but the warmth in his eyes reassured her. Slowly, she nodded, and he sat down. For a long time, they said nothing. Lyra watched as he gazed over the gardens, his posture relaxed, yet attentive. It was different from the Veyari, who always seemed to be measuring, judging, or calculating. Ethan simply existed in the moment, appreciating the world without expectation. Finally, he spoke again. "This place is incredible," he said. "The gardens, the way the platforms float, it's beautiful." His eyes glanced at her briefly, and he added, "I'm glad you're here to see it with me." Lyra's throat tightened. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that. Not her parents, not her teachers, not her peers. It wasn't flattery, it wasn't pity, it was acknowledgement. She nodded slowly, feeling a flicker of warmth in her chest. "It is beautiful," she murmured. I come here often. It's peaceful." Ethan smiled. "I can see why." He leaned back slightly, letting the breeze touch his face. "I think sometimes, even in the busiest, most advanced cities, people forget to notice the small things. I'm glad I get to notice them now." Lyra looked at him, her curiosity growing. She had spent years feeling invisible, unwanted. And yet here was someone who treated her like she mattered, like her presence was significant. Her chest swelled with a feeling she had never known: validation. She realized that being seen was not about grand gestures or recognition from the powerful. It was about someone noticing you, choosing to spend time with you, and valuing your existence. They began to talk. Ethan asked gentle questions about her life, her experiences, and the floating gardens. Lyra answered cautiously at first, but the human's calm demeanor and genuine interest drew her out. She found herself laughing at small jokes he made, explaining the patterns of the gardens and sharing her favorite quiet spots. For the first time, she felt that her thoughts mattered, that someone truly wanted to hear them. Hours passed, though neither noticed. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. Lyra had forgotten about her usual fears, about being ignored or dismissed. She felt a quiet strength rising within her, fueled by Ethan's simple, steady presence. It was a strange, wonderful feeling to be wanted, not for beauty, status, or skill, but for simply being herself. When it was time for the humans to return to their shuttle, Ethan stood and extended a hand. "I hope we can talk again, Lyra," he said. His smile was warm, and his eyes held a promise of patience and respect. Lyra took his hand, feeling a connection that went beyond words. As she watched him leave, she realized something profound. For the first time, she did not feel invisible. She did not feel unwanted. Someone had seen her, chosen to sit beside her and treat her as if she were important. That simple act, which seemed so small in the grand scale of the city, had changed something inside her. Lyra remained in the floating gardens long after the humans left, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She thought about the possibilities, the chance that someone could see her for who she truly was, the hope that her life could change, and the strange, exciting notion that maybe she could belong somewhere after all. For the first time in her life, Lyra allowed herself to dream. She imagined walking through the gardens with Ethan again, exploring the city, learning about humans, and maybe even showing them the hidden corners of Zyphera that no one else noticed. She imagined herself no longer unseen, no longer ignored but recognized for her thoughts, her feelings, and her presence. And as the city lights began to glow softly in the twilight, Lyra smiled. She did not know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was no longer alone. After that first day in the floating gardens, Lyra found herself thinking about Ethan constantly. She had never known anyone like him, a human who saw her as she truly was, who did not judge her for being quiet or different. His presence lingered in her mind like a soft light, warming corners of herself she had long left in shadow. She had spent years feeling invisible, unwanted, and overlooked. Yet in his calm and steady way, Ethan had shown her that she mattered. The next morning, she awoke earlier than usual, her thoughts already drifting toward the gardens. The soft violet light of Zyphera's twin suns bathed her room, and she could hear the gentle hum of energy crystals throughout the city. Usually, mornings felt heavy with expectation and the weight of others' indifference, but today felt different. She felt a quiet curiosity, an excitement she had never dared to experience before. She wandered through the city toward the gardens, careful to avoid the eyes of officials who might scold her for idling. Her heart raced as she approached the familiar platform, and there, already waiting, was Ethan. He stood with his hands behind his back, scanning the gardens, his posture relaxed and confident. His dark eyes met hers, and he smiled. "Good morning, Lyra," he said warmly. "I hope I'm not intruding." Lyra shook her head. "Not at all," she replied. I was coming here anyway." Ethan nodded. "I thought you might be. May I join you?" She nodded again, stepping aside so he could sit beside her. They shared a comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the subtle hum of the gardens and the distant sounds of the city. Lyra noticed how different he seemed from the Veari. The humans did not hover above life, judging it or seeking to control it. They immersed themselves in it, observing without interference, participating without dominance. "I was hoping to learn more about your world," Ethan said after a while. "I want to understand the Veari, not just from what I read, but from someone who knows it from the inside." "If you're willing, of course." Lyra hesitated. No one had ever asked her to share her perspective before. Most adults had assumed she had little to contribute, and her peers ignored her entirely. Yet here was a human, sitting beside her, inviting her to speak. A quiet thrill ran through her chest. "I can try," she said softly, and so she began to speak. She told him about the floating gardens, the patterns of the energy bridges, the way the platforms adjusted to the sun's movement, and the quiet corners where the light always felt just right. She explained the customs of the Veari, the rituals, the dances, the social rules that governed even the smallest interactions. Ethan listened intently, asking questions that were thoughtful, never intrusive. "You notice details others miss," he said at one point, his tone warm. "Most Veari would never take the time to observe the subtle rhythms of the city like you do." Lyra felt a small blush rise to her cheeks. She had never been praised for her observations before. It felt strange, wonderful, almost dizzying. I just like to notice things," she admitted. "I guess it helps me feel connected even if I'm alone." Ethan nodded. "That makes sense, and I think it's a rare gift. You see the world as it truly is, not just as it appears to others. That's something special." Lyra's heart swelled. No one had ever said words like that to her. No one had ever made her feel valued for simply being herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she might actually be important, that she might matter. Over the next few days, their meetings became a ritual. Ethan sought her out in the gardens, and Lyra waited for him. They spoke about everything: the history of Zyphera, human culture, her dreams, and the quiet fears she rarely shared. Each conversation, each shared smile, strengthened a bond neither fully understood yet. Despite the growing warmth between them, Lyra felt a small fear gnawing at the edges of her heart. The Veyari were a proud, strict society, and they did not always welcome outsiders. The officials had already noticed her lingering near the humans. Some whispers reached her, small but sharp, warning her to keep her distance. She feared punishment, humiliation, or worse. One afternoon, as they walked along a high platform with the city spread below them, Lyra voiced her fear. I, I worry about what others will say, she confessed. They may not like that I spend time with you. Ethan stopped and looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. Lyra, he said, I cannot change what others think, but I can tell you this, your worth is not determined by them, it's determined by you. And if you are happy being yourself, if you are happy sharing your thoughts with me, then nothing else matters. Lyra looked into his eyes, searching for signs of insincerity, but found none. His words sank deep into her heart. She realized that she had spent years trying to please others who would never see her. And yet this human, a visitor from another world, treated her as an equal, as someone worthy of respect and attention. That night, Lyra lay in her room, replaying the day in her mind. She thought about the small gestures, how Ethan had adjusted his pace to match hers, how he had listened without interrupting, how he had smiled at her insights. Every action was a quiet declaration that she was seen, that she mattered. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. The following days brought challenges. Officials began to monitor her more closely, and she felt the weight of their judgment pressing against her. Some peers whispered, wondering why she spent time with a human. Lyra felt moments of doubt creep in, moments when she questioned if she deserved this attention, if she should retreat to the shadows once more. But each time, Ethan's presence reminded her of another possibility. One afternoon, as they rested on a garden terrace, he said, You don't have to shrink to fit in. You don't have to hide. You are already enough as you are. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever said those words to her. No one had ever made her feel safe to exist in her own skin. She nodded, unable to speak, and Ethan simply placed a reassuring hand on the edge of her platform. No pressure, no judgment, only presence. Their bond deepened through small, shared experiences. Ethan taught her about human ways of communicating, of showing respect and care without elaborate rituals. Lyra taught him about the subtleties of the Veyari, the unspoken rules, and the hidden beauty of their world. Together, they discovered a rhythm, a quiet friendship that transcended the boundaries of their species. One evening, as the twin suns set and painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, Lyra and Ethan sat atop the highest platform. The city glimmered below like a sea of stars, and the floating gardens shimmered in the fading light. Lyra felt a peace she had never known. She realized that she no longer feared being alone. She no longer felt invisible. She had found someone who saw her, who valued her presence, and who treated her with respect and kindness. Ethan turned to her and smiled. Lyra, I want you to remember something. No matter what anyone says, no matter what challenges come, you are never truly alone. You are seen. You are important, and I am glad to know you. Lyra smiled back, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She felt a spark of courage ignite within her, a realization that perhaps she could step forward into the world and claim her place. She could be herself unapologetically, without fear of judgment or rejection. In the quiet of that evening, Lyra allowed herself to dream. She imagined a future where she and Ethan explored not just the gardens, but the city, the stars beyond Scifi, and the countless wonders that waited. She imagined a life where being seen and valued was not a fleeting moment, but a constant presence. The days that followed solidified their bond. Lyra became more confident in her interactions with others, speaking up in ways she never had before, sharing insights and opinions that surprised even herself. She discovered that respect and recognition could ripple outward, influencing not just one life, but the lives of those around her. Yet, despite the growing warmth, she never took it for granted. She remembered the loneliness that had defined her existence, the shadows she had inhabited for so long. And she understood that Ethan's presence was not a solution to her problems. It was a mirror, reflecting the strength and value she had always possessed, even when no one else had acknowledged it. Together, Lyra and Ethan continued to meet, to talk, and to explore. Each encounter built trust, understanding, and a quiet joy that neither had expected. And as Lyra looked at the human beside her, she realized something extraordinary. Being wanted, being seen, was not a matter of grand gestures or recognition from the powerful. It was the small, consistent acts of attention, care, and presence that changed everything. Lyra no longer saw herself as unwanted. She no longer felt invisible. For the first time, she felt like she belonged, not just in Zyphera, but in a world where someone truly cared. And in that realization, a new strength blossomed within her, a courage that would guide her into the challenges yet to come. The bond between the human and the Veari was still new, still fragile in the eyes of the world, but it was undeniable. Ethan's quiet presence, his unwavering respect, and his simple acts of kindness had begun a transformation in Lyra that nothing else could. And as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the city in shades of gold and violet, Lyra understood that her life had changed forever, and that the days ahead, while uncertain, held a promise she had never dared to imagine. The city of Zyphera had never looked more alive. To Lyra, she walked through the floating gardens with a confidence she had never known, her shoulders straight, her eyes bright. The twin suns bathed the platforms in soft golden light, making the silver towers glow like polished metal. For years she had felt invisible, overlooked, and unwanted. Now, walking beside Ethan, she felt something entirely new, a sense of belonging and strength that came from being truly seen. Ethan had become more than a friend. He was a constant presence, steady and patient, the kind of person who did not just listen but understood. He did not judge her for her quiet nature or her differences. He encouraged her, challenged her to notice the beauty in her own life, and showed her that her thoughts and ideas mattered. Every day with him was a lesson in trust, respect, and the quiet power of human kindness. Yet the world around them remained uncertain. Officials continued to watch Lyra's movements, whispering among themselves and sending occasional reminders that her closeness to a human was unusual, even frowned upon. Some peers avoided her, unsure how to treat someone who defied tradition. But Lyra no longer felt fear in the same way. She had learned that her value did not depend on others' approval. She had learned that being seen, being respected, and being treated as worthy could come from a simple act of genuine care. One afternoon, a grand event was announced. The Veari city would hold a ceremony to honor exceptional citizens, a public gathering that brought officials, scholars, and leaders together. Lyra had never been invited to anything of significance, never expected to participate. Her name had never been spoken with acknowledgement outside her family. Now, with Ethan at her side, she felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. As they arrived at the ceremony, the halls of silver and crystal shimmered with 1,000 lights. Veari citizens moved gracefully across the platforms, their robes flowing, their expressions formal. Lyra felt the weight of many eyes on her. Whispers traveled across the crowd, some questioning her presence, others surprised by her confidence. She felt a small flicker of old fear but quickly reminded herself of Ethan's words. She was seen, she was valued, and nothing could diminish that truth. The ceremony began, a formal presentation of achievements and recognition. Lyra's name was unexpectedly called. She froze for a moment, heart pounding, then stepped forward onto the raised platform. All eyes were upon her. She had walked through life as invisible, ignored, dismissed. And now, in this moment, she stood where few would have expected her to stand. Ethan was beside her, a quiet anchor. He smiled reassuringly, and she felt a surge of courage. As she looked across the assembly, she realized that recognition was not about others' approval. It was about claiming her own strength and allowing others to see it. When Lyra spoke, her voice was steady, carrying through the hall. She spoke of her experiences, her moments of loneliness, and the simple, powerful impact of being treated as important. She shared how a human had chosen to sit beside her to listen, to care, and how that small act had transformed her life. Her words were heartfelt, honest, and profound. They resonated not just with those who had known her struggle, but with others who had felt overlooked, underestimated, or invisible. The crowd fell silent, absorbing the sincerity in her voice. Even the officials who had once questioned her presence were moved by the courage and authenticity she displayed. Ethan's presence amplified her strength, but he never overshadowed her. He remained beside her, supportive but silent, letting her voice carry. It was a new experience for Lyra, to be acknowledged not because she was forced to compete or conform, but because someone believed in her, and she, in turn, believed in herself. When the ceremony concluded, Lyra descended from the platform with a confidence that surprised even her. People who had ignored her before now nodded respectfully, some offering small words of encouragement. She realized that recognition was contagious. Once someone noticed her value, others could not help but see it too. In the following days, life on Zyphera shifted subtly. Peers began to approach her for advice, curious about the confidence she now carried. Officials treated her with respect, no longer dismissing her observations or ideas. The city had not changed overnight, but Lyra had. She had learned that courage, self-worth, and genuine connection could transform not just a single life, but the perception of a world. Ethan and Lyra continued to meet in the floating gardens. Their conversations deepened, exploring not only the details of their respective worlds, but also the shared understanding of what it meant to be human and Vayari, to be seen and respected. They laughed together, studied the city together, and shared quiet moments where words were unnecessary. Each interaction strengthened their bond, built on trust, respect, and the small, consistent acts of care that had brought them together. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Lyra stood on a high platform, looking out over the city. Ethan was beside her, his hand brushing lightly against hers, a silent reminder of his presence and support. For the first time, she felt fully at home in her own life. She was no longer defined by neglect or invisibility. She had claimed her space, her voice, and her worth. Lyra realized that her journey had not been about changing others' opinions. It had been about recognizing her own value. Ethan had shown her the way, not by giving her power, but by reflecting the power that had always existed within her. He had treated her like a queen, not by authority, but by respect, attention, and care. And in that treatment, she had learned to stand tall, to believe in herself, and to see that being wanted was not a privilege. It was a birthright for anyone who allowed themselves to be seen. As the city lights shimmered and the floating gardens glowed softly in the twilight, Lyra and Ethan sat together in companionable silence. The world was vast, full of challenges and unknowns, but it was also full of possibilities. They were from different worlds, yet they had found common ground, a bridge built on understanding, respect, and quiet courage. Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude. She thought of the lonely days she had endured, the shadows she had walked through, and the moments when she had believed she would always be invisible. Those days had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. Now, with Ethan beside her and her own strength awakened, she saw the world with clarity and hope. She smiled softly, feeling a lightness she had never known. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be wanted, to be seen, and to be valued, not for appearances, not for status, but for simply being herself. And in that understanding, she discovered a quiet power, a confidence that would guide her for the rest of her life. The bond between Lyra and Ethan became a symbol, not just for them, but for others in the city. Their friendship, built on simple, consistent acts of respect and care, inspired those who had long felt overlooked. Slowly, quietly, the culture of Zyphera began to shift. People began to notice each other more, to acknowledge presence and value in ways they had never done before. The city, once a place of rigid hierarchy and invisible citizens, became a place where being seen was possible, and where kindness and recognition could transform lives. Lyra looked at Ethan, who met her gaze with warmth and understanding. She knew their journey was far from over. Challenges would come, opinions might still clash, and the future remained uncertain. But she also knew that she was no longer alone. She had found someone who respected her, who believed in her, and who treated her with unwavering kindness. And that, more than anything, had changed her life. As night fell over the city, Lyra and Ethan continued to sit among the floating gardens, watching the stars appear and the lights of Zyphera twinkle below. In that moment, Lyra felt a deep sense of peace. She had discovered her worth, forged a bond that transcended worlds, and learned that even the smallest acts of attention, care, and respect could awaken strength, hope, and courage. And for the first time in her life, Lyra knew she was wanted, not because of what she had achieved or how she looked, but simply because she existed. She smiled, turning toward Ethan, and felt the quiet certainty that this was only the beginning of a life filled with respect, friendship, and endless possibilities.